Zara walked down the sidewalk, her fingers tucked into thin gloves, trying to shield them from the cool morning breeze. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, casting a soft orange glow across the pale blue sky. The morning was still, as if the world itself was easing into the day at its own pace. Around her, the only sounds were the hurried footsteps of a few commuters, already on their way to somewhere. Zara wasn't in a rush. For her, mornings like this were a gift, moments to pause and connect with the stillness of the world, to settle into the rhythm of everyday life. She turned right, heading towards the small cafe on the corner she passed by every morning. The glass walls of the cafe reflected her silhouette, blending into the city's awakening scene. The gentle hum of the espresso machine added a layer of warmth to the air inside. Zara stepped through the door, the chime above it ringing softly, and the smell of freshly ground coffee greeted her like an old friend. "Morning, Zara," called out Jamie, the barista, from behind the counter. He was always there at this time. His friendly smile never seemed to waver, no matter the hour. "Morning, Jamie," Zara replied, sliding into her usual spot by the window. She took a moment to appreciate the quiet buzz of the cafe, the soft chatter of regulars, and the rhythmic clink of ceramic cups being set down. Everything was in its place, just as it had been the day before, and the day before that. The cafe was small but cozy, its walls lined with local art, some of which Zara had even admired during her previous visits. It felt like a familiar second home, a place where nothing extraordinary ever happened, but the comfort of its routine was enough to make it feel significant. She settled into her chair, taking in the calm of the room as she waited for her usual black coffee, no sugar. Outside, the city was waking up, but here, time seemed to slow down. Zara knew that in a few hours, the streets would be bustling. The noise would return, and life would rush forward as it always did. But for now, in this quiet moment, she was content to simply exist in the stillness, surrounded by the scent of coffee and the low hum of everyday life. The door chime rang again as a new customer entered, and Zara's attention drifted toward the window. A car drove past, its headlights still flickering in the dim light of the morning. The city felt big, yet in this small corner of it, Zara felt strangely connected to everything. The world was full of stories, she thought, some big, some small. For now, hers was just one of many, unfolding slowly in the background, like the gentle rhythm of her morning routine. And she was okay with that. The barista slid her coffee over to her with a smile, breaking her thoughts. "Here you go, your usual." "Thanks," Zara said, taking the steaming cup into her hands and letting the warmth seep through the mug. She raised it to her lips, savoring the first sip, the rich bitterness spreading across her tongue. In this small, quiet moment, Zara felt at peace, and as the morning unfolded outside, Zara knew that today, like every other day, would carry on at its own pace, with no rush, no hurry, just another step in the rhythm of her ordinary life. For now, it was enough. And as the light outside shifted, casting shadows across the table, she took another sip of coffee, looking out at the world she knew so well, wondering what the rest of the day might bring. The sun had fully risen now, its light stretching across the city, casting long, lazy shadows on the sidewalks. Zara sat still, her hands cradling the coffee cup, staring out the window without really seeing. Her gaze drifted from the faces of the people walking by, their lives unfolding in real time, to the distant skyline where the buildings stood, like silent witnesses to the passage of time. Everything was familiar, yet something subtle, almost imperceptible, felt different. She shifted in her chair, a slight unease settling in her chest. There was a weight in the air, an unspoken tension that seemed to hum just beneath the surface of the ordinary, like a note held too long in a song. Zara couldn't quite place it, but the feeling lingered, a quiet dissonance in the otherwise calm rhythm of the morning. Her fingers traced the edge of the coffee cup absently. The warmth from the ceramic grounded her, but the unease wouldn't fade. She glanced over to the counter where Jamie was busy cleaning cups, his movements as practiced and fluid as always. The steady hum of the cafe, the soft jazz playing in the background, the quiet conversations, the clink of silverware, reminded her of how easily life could be consumed by routine, how moments could slip by unnoticed and through an open hand. It was then that the door chime rang again. A customer entered, but this time, Zara's attention snapped to the sound of the footsteps. The rhythm was off, slower, more deliberate, as if the person was hesitant, or perhaps searching for something. Zara couldn't help but look over, drawn to the figure at the door. A man stepped in, tall, with a coat that seemed too heavy for the mild weather. His face was obscured by the hood he wore, but Zara felt an odd, inexplicable connection to him, something that tugged at her gut in a way she couldn't explain. He paused just inside the door, glancing around as if unsure of his next move. His eyes briefly met hers, and in that fleeting moment, something in the air shifted. Zara's heart skipped a beat. The man didn't smile, didn't acknowledge anyone, but his presence seemed to take up more space than just his physical form. He stood there for a second too long, as though considering whether or not to approach the counter. Then, without a word, he turned and walked past the tables toward the back of the cafe. Zara blinked, momentarily stunned, her thoughts scrambling to catch up. What had just happened? Why did she feel settled? She looked around, trying to see if anyone else had noticed, but the cafe continued as normal. Jamie was still focused on his work. A couple at a corner table was laughing softly, absorbed in their own conversation. Nothing seemed out of place, yet Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening, something that didn't belong in the world she knew. She stood up slowly, her coffee cup now cold in her hands. Without thinking, she walked toward the back of the cafe, toward the shadowed hallway that led to the restrooms and storage area. The sound of her footsteps felt too loud in the quiet, and her breath came a little faster now, as if her body knew something she couldn't yet understand. As she turned to the corner, she saw him again. The man in the coat. He was standing in front of a door, one that led to the small courtyard behind the cafe. His back was to her, but Zara could see the faint outline of something in his hand. Zara froze. She didn't know why, but something about the way he was holding it, as though it were a secret too precious to share, made her feel exposed, as though she had stumbled upon something she wasn't supposed to see. The man turned slightly, sensing her presence. For a brief second, their eyes met once more, and this time, Zara saw something in his expression. Something hard, something almost knowing. Before she could react, he stepped outside, the door closing softly behind him. The chime above it rang once, and just like that, he was gone. Zara stood there for a moment, her breath shallow, her mind racing. What had just happened? Who was he? And why did it feel like the world had just shifted, even if only by the slightest degree? She turned back toward the cafe, her heart pounding in her chest. The normal sounds of the place returned to her ears, but the unease lingered. Something had changed, though she couldn't say what exactly. The rhythm of her day had been interrupted, just enough to leave a lingering question, a gap in the story she had been living. The door had closed behind him, but the letter still felt like it was in the air, hovering between them. Zara took a deep breath and turned away, the weight of the unknown settling into her chest.